Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mural Arts Institute presents Towards Repair and Fabrication, Ritual Art and Ecologies of Justice. We are so grateful that Charlyn, Magdaline Griffith, and Liz Kennedy are here with us tonight. My name is Sepihdeah Mohsenian-Rahman. I'm a program manager at the Mural Arts Institute. My body of work intersects with participatory public art, environmental justice, and just transitions. And I'm so grateful to be hosting these wonderful artists and alchemists in community with my dear colleague and friend, Katelyn Rivas, who manages a similar body of work at the Institute with us. So I just wanted to, wonderful, our numbers are looking really good. I'm grateful that you're all here and we're just going to get into it. I'm going to start with an access statement. I'm going to share that I am a brown-skinned woman. I am sitting in front of a cream wall. I am wearing a white shirt with cacti on it. I have a gold septum ring on my nose, and I have a short bob cut like my 2-year-old daughter. I also want to lead us in a land acknowledgement that I have co-created with friends and colleagues at Indigenous Peoples Day here in Philadelphia. And as I read this, I encourage you to take to the chat and perhaps share where you are tuning in from as well. And so, we acknowledge the land on which we live and labor were stolen from the Lenni Lenape peoples and their descendants who survived and remained in the homeland known as Lenapehoking, and those in the diaspora who were forcefully removed as far as Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Canada, and are still marginalized even in the city of brotherly love. We also acknowledge that Philadelphia has a unique position in the nation's founding, and its successors are still responsible to uphold treaty rights for the land stolen and to correct the wrongdoings for the policies that led to the enslavement, massacre, and forced assimilation of the Indigenous peoples across the United States. And the effects of this colonial genocidal legacy has yet to be addressed. Furthermore, we acknowledge that Philadelphia was built by Black, African-American peoples whose ancestors were stolen from Africa, and that the current social, economic, environmental, and political inequalities experienced by more recent BIPOC communities living in Philly are a direct result and effect of this historical colonial violence that has been exerted for centuries against Indigenous people of the Americas, including Native Hawaiians, Alaskan Natives, Inuits, and Indigenous Caribbeans. Thank you so much. I'm also going to follow up by dropping the name of a lot of Indigenous orgs who are doing good work here in Philly, along with the links to the tribal governances of the Lenape here in Philly and the diaspora. And so, my friends, it is with great honor that I introduce our speakers here today. First, Charlyn Magdaline Griffith is a socially engaged interdisciplinary artist examining ways that the dead, ancestors, communicate with the living, the progeny. A researcher, artist, activist, currently participating in a fellowship with the Philadelphia Area Special Collections Libraries, Charlyn focuses on the relationship between migration, between the Arawak Islands, the so-called Caribbean, and Philadelphia. Their performance, objects, and imagery are rituals for strengthening the potency of Black and Indigenous memory and imagination. Trained as a sociologist and ecologist with a long career in social justice, their abolitionist framework and specialization in community health and art education supports their emerging art career. Griffith is a Black queer parent of Matthias, Math, Compton, and Aya, and spouse to Janine Kayembe Oro, born in London, England, to a Trinidadian mother and Guyanese father. They currently live and work alongside homesteads in Lenapehoking, Philly, and Chemahowie Land, Joshua Tree, California. And Liz Kennedy is a storyteller, environmental justice organizer, and alchemist living in Detroit, occupied Wayawatanig Anishinaabe territory. So sorry. After graduating from Duke University in 2017, Liz worked at the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Program as a research and policy analyst before moving to Detroit in 2019. She is program coordinator for the Detroit-based Allied Media Conference and is committed to creating spaces for artists and organizers to strategize, celebrate, and cross-pollinate across movements and mediums. They also Alchemize with Lead to Life, a translocal collective of queer artists, healers, and ecologists, bridging racial and environmental justice through ceremony and art practice to provoke radical imagination towards justice. Her work is to queer systems of oppression through joy, ritual, abolition, Black feminism, decolonization, and relationship with the more than human world. We are so grateful that they are here with us tonight to engage in conversation with one another and allow us to witness this glory. We're so excited. And it's with that spirit that I'm gonna just pass the mic over to Charlyn, who will ground us.
Thank you, Sepihdeah. And thank you, Liz, for being here to get into it with me, or to be in it with me. Yeah, welcome everyone. Again, thank you for bringing yourself to this space and all of your complexity. Thank you for rallying, your awareness to be here and be engaged in inquiry about art and how it can and does transform our environment. I just want to invite folks to really take stock of your body in this moment. For those of us that are seated, maybe you look at your rest of your body. Maybe you're beholding yourself in your screen. If you can see yourself, maybe you're just feeling your appendages. Maybe you're becoming aware of the breath as it moves through your body. Are you breathing through your nose or through your mouth? With so many different bodies, there are so many different ways to become aware of our bodies. So I just invite folks to find one way, one body part, one aspect, one thing that your body is doing currently that you can bring awareness to, and start there. If you're able, you can close your eyes. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And if you're able to draw breath in through your nose or mouth, draw breath in to whatever part of your body you brought awareness to. And exhale. Continue to take these breaths and send the energy from whatever part of your body you started out to other parts of your body that you want to bring alive, that you want to bring awareness to, that you want to activate in this moment, in this listening, in this witnessing. Whatever part of your body feels most able is also the perfect part of your body to root with. Root down into the floor beneath you, past the floor into the land. Maybe you're rooting all the way down to feel the earth's core as it connects to your own. Breathe here. If you are able, bring your body's awareness to the center of your body, wherever you consider the center. And take a few more deep breaths there. And then consider as you exhale how far reaching your breath is, how your breath goes beyond you, out into the world, all directions. Continue to breathe, and I welcome you, invite you, come back to this breath, to this centeredness as you listen today. If something resonates deeply, inspires, breath. Thank you. You can whisper to yourself, thank you for being here and all your complexity with us today. And I'm honored to read an opening with Liz from Led to Life. Nice.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that practice. It was very grounding. Such a beautiful way to arrive. So thank you, Charlyn. Hey, y'all. Really excited to be here and excited to share this mantra from our practice at Led to Life. And we begin all of our meetings, events, anytime we're collaborating with folks, we invite our community into a practice of reading this mantra together. So I will start, and Charlyn, I'm excited to weave with you. Thank you, Creator, for the mountains, the soil, the trees, the air. May we honor these elements as the ingredients of our alchemy. May we be in right relationship to these gifts. May we celebrate your abundance, never take more than we need, and give ourselves back to you as a gift.
We offer our gratitude for the ancestors, original people and descendants of this land, the Lenape, the Lene and Lenape. Please say to yourself whatever peoples you are honoring today. And we come humbly to continue listening for right relationship, accountability, and regeneration to these lands. May our practice serve this place and the prayer that Black liberation also requires Indigenous liberation.
May humility move first so as to let grace guide us down the path. May we decompose violence in ourselves before we ask it of the world. May we learn from the mushrooms what it means to carry death into new life. May we remember freedom is a practice, not a destination, one that we must practice every day.
May we always be imaginative in the face of violence. May we be willing to reimagine what it means to be secure. May we liberate the sacred trapped inside of all weapons, remembering that the gun has a source. May we too surrender to source.
May we be diligent and discerning in our work, unending until the land and our hearts are liberated from greed, hatred, and delusion.
And still, may we liberate our sense of urgency, of productivity, of right and wrong, and call in a spirit that knows that this will take time, that knows that we cannot solve a problem with the same mind that made it, that knows beauty not interrupt the way it is possible.
Ashe.
Ashe, ashe.
Gratitude. It makes me hype every time, like
Every time. And this just, it reads just like I would pray. So it just feels so right.
Mm-hmm. May it be so.
Thank you,
Yes.
Sepihdeah, for that moment. May it be so.
Thank you so much, Charlyn and Liz. That was beautiful. Absolutely. A grounding. My friends, is this for me to pose, Liz, or for you to introduce this question?
I can introduce it unless you feel called. Yeah, so to start, I love this question. And I'm very curious what y'all's answer is. But yes, who are you dedicating your presence here today? And this isn't just a conversation for the three of us. This is a conversation for each of you who have devoted your time and attention to be here with us today, to also reflect on who do you dedicate your time here today? Who do you dedicate your attention to? So we encourage you to, to speak the same to yourselves, all of you who are tuning in.
If you want to take yourself off of the mic, those who are in the audience, and to speak that into the space, that would be really wonderful. Well, or maybe you don't have the ability to unmute yourself.
I don't think they have that ability.
I'm so sorry. Please drop it in the chat.
But they can type
it
in the
Pardon
chat.
me.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm dedicating my presence today to the migrants and refugees who are arriving from Afghanistan right now, and who we are greeting in Philly as the first port of entry. Really, it's just consuming so much of my mind right now. And I know that all of our communities have histories of migration in response to colonial violence, and just sitting with that. And thanking you all for being here in those multitudes that have brought you here before.
I'm loving all these dedications in the chat. Thanks, y'all. To all the children of the world, both living and in the land of the ancestors, my ancestors back in Jamaica. Yes, yes, my children and all their relations. The sun. Come on now.
Right.
I'm also thinking about my ancestors deeply in this conversation. I feel like since we came together to envision this conversation, it's been deeply spirit-led, which has been such a gift. So I am dedicating my participation to my grandmother, Sally Jean Renee Tilford Kennedy. God bless her soul. And yes, Mustang Sally, you already know. And our last conversation, she reminds me to care for myself before I care for others. And that lesson feels so present for me this season. And it's Libra season, like it's all about the self-devotion. So I'm holding her close. And I also want to dedicate my participation to the mushrooms. I was thinking about like what more than human kin that I've been relying on. And I've been on a foraging hunt this season for chicken of the woods and lobster mushrooms, and have also just been really calling in that decomposition work, kind of what the mantra alluded to, you know, what can mushrooms teach us about turning death into new life? And I know both Charlyn and I work so much in grief work and death doulaship. So always learning from mushrooms, and this is their season. So yes, dedicating my participation here today to them as well.
Thank you. Charlyn.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge in the chat that Alexander, someone, one of my children, my waiting mother, Chibabwa, who's a farmer, and her grandfather, Joseph Kapita, who's a spiritualist. We've got someone asking, Liz, what is this season about? They missed what you said. They were asking to speak again on the mushrooms. I think that I would love to maybe start there when we start our conversation. So you'll have a chance to speak on the mushrooms again in this season. And someone else is dedicating their presence to the voiceless, the spirits of all lives prematurely ended by violence. I just thank everyone for those contributions, for being brave to speak them, to allow us to speak them with you, for you. And I dedicate today to the Kalinago Islands or Arawak Islands, the so-called West Indies, where my people are from, both in indigeneity and those who were forcibly brought to the Caribbean. And I dedicate this presence, this moment, to migration, all sorts of migration, human and more than human migration, the butterflies. Yeah. Such a good.
Beautiful. Thank you all for contributing to this opening in this way. I feel as if even though we're all tuning in virtually and physically separate, I feel the community here, and I'm grateful for how many ancestors folks have brought to this space. I'm deeply humbled. So yeah, Charlyn, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I am curious what you are paying attention to these days.
I am paying deep and expansive attention. I am speaking of more than human kin. And I think that we've been in a real right moment for communication with more than human kin that are microscopic, especially with the coronavirus.
Yes.
You know, the last 2 years, a lot of the meditations have been to like slow down and go really, really granular, microscopic with the listening. And so I've been having to do that with my body. I'm just like, what do you want to teach me now? What can I do for you that will help me to listen better and for you to show me more? And so that's what I'm paying attention to. I'm paying attention to the extension of my arm, my smile, the difference of like the musculature in my face to smile versus frowning, and being, you know, tight, that tightness. I'm really paying attention to like how I can feel more open. Yeah, thank you for asking that. I wonder, what are you paying attention to?
I feel that. And I'm just grateful for your orientation to return us to our bodies. Yeah, just grateful for that practice. I mean, being on Anishinaabe lands in the fall, definitely paying attention to transition, the falling of leaves, letting go, you know, coming back to the mushrooms, that decomposition work. And, you know, in October across cultures, you know, the veil is thin this month. And so I'm feeling deeper connection to ancestors. I'm feeling, I'm just listening, just really listening. And in a couple weeks, I'm preparing right now to travel to Glasgow for the UN climate negotiations in a couple weeks. And so that is also on my spirit about how I can be accountable to my community here in Detroit, what prayers really want to come forth. I'm traveling with some other queer, Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, and am really trying to listen to what ceremonies need to be held. And I'm also just trying to protect myself. I feel a lot of ways about traveling to the heart of the empire in the midst of a pandemic for climate justice. And I'm just sitting with all those contradictions with as much grace as I can. So yeah, just really listening to what wants to come through with that. So those are some of the things that I'm paying attention to these days.
It's incredible seeing how much everyone is doing and what that means seasonally. I want to know.
Thank you for sharing.
Incredible. And I just want everyone to know that Charlyn is like managing food distribution right now, like from their stoop, which is like incredible that we get to like witness that momentum as well, as they both like engage deeply with mutual aid and community care. And if you're in Philly, maybe you've also benefited from that community that they douse out through Bunny Hop. And
shout out to Bunny Hop. That's right.
You might have seen them do Instagram takeovers this week and last, both of them. Right on. I'm seeing the chat. I love that. And I want to know from both of you, as you expand to the audience and share about your work, your artistic work, your ecological work, I want them to know more about your body of work, first of all, like share a little bit each, but I really want to know, like, where does creative practice and your artistic practice and your community of creators and artists and cultural workers weave into this work that you're doing in your respective communities and beyond? You're all like bi-coastal, you're everywhere. So I know we all want to hear a bit about that.
Yeah, I'm going to take this first because Liz, I wanted to pull something out from what you said. And I think that it supports your question, Sepihdeah, from like what that you're paying attention to the prayers, the ceremonies that need to be held. And I think that, Sepihdeah, to answer your question, that is such an essential part of the community practice that I think I can speak for both of us, that both of us engage in. And I wanted to affirm, Liz, that, the conversations, just recently, another creative friend was asking, like, what do you do for someone that's in like deep crisis that you don't know what to do for them? And I realized I answered the question, and then it wasn't until it dropped down in my body, the answer, that I said, oh, that's where my practice starts. And it is the prayer. It is recognizing that in this taking on that are leaning deeply into our purpose and our connection with all else, that sometimes the work doesn't live in a spreadsheet. It lives on the altar.
Come on now.
Sometimes it doesn't live on, sometimes it doesn't live on, the screens, but instead in the fabric, the seeds, the hugs, the touching someone's hair. I've been really, just to talk a little bit about like my kind of paying attention to my body, in that I've been like really recognizing how people are not used to being touched right now by a lot of people. And so just holding someone and saying, can I kisses on people's foreheads? And I know I can feel them shudder and come back down into their body and say, oh, wow. Like I needed that. I want to offer that a large part of my work right now, when we say body of work, it's literally that I'm using my body to do this work. You know, I'm really orienting to like what my hugs can do, what my hands can do. Yeah, and the way that it feels. And then Liz, I would love to hear from you how you find what like best practices for yourself you find in translating that to the spreadsheet, to the to the UN, you know, because I know it's easier to say it, but folks have real live like reports to write.
Yes. Oof, that's the question, right? How do we alchemize the nonprofit industrial complex? That is a great question. Well, I think the led to life mantra is an example of one way that I, practice and try and incorporate ceremony, or just a one way that no matter who I work with, I mean, we read this mantra with our funders to our ceremonialists, like we do it with everyone. And it's a way to really invite spirit at the center of the work. So before we open up a Google Doc together, before we have a meeting with our program officer, we are going to read our prayer, and it's our compass that can always orient us north. It is like, okay, y'all, no matter how we get caught up in the logistics of it, this is what we're here for. And I think I also have my own individual practice with honoring ancestors. I actually have been working with an incredible Black trans healer through altar consultations, and after weeks of like really trying to figure out why my altar just like I wasn't connecting, they were like, your altar is the forest, like your altar is the Detroit River, it's Lake Huron, like this is where your spirit practice needs to lie. And so that has been such a huge shift for me as well. So I'm finding altars all over. My pile of books on my desk right now is also an altar. And so I'm also thinking about bringing ceremony into so many different aspects of my life and work. And if I can't work with people who cannot honor that, then I don't need to be doing the work, right? And like, that's one of the things that was so affirming about this process with y'all is like, Sepihdeah, you just made so much space for us to be like, we just gonna let spirit lead us. Like, we don't really need no questions for real. Like, it's the only way I want to work. Even this, like, come on, like, even this cohort that I'm traveling with, this delegation, it's through Sustain Us, and it's led by this really incredible Two-Spirit Black Indigenous healer. And they actually sent us this wellness stipend this week for like pre, during, and post care, as a way of being like, yo, we're about to bring a bunch of like Black and brown queer folks to like an incredibly violent institutional space. Get your readings done, go to a therapist, go to a massage. Like, a lot of it is also just about moving resources. I think often about Saida Hartman's quote that care is the antidote to violence. And of all my orientations as an environmental justice organizer, as a ceremonialist with Led to Life, my first goal is to create livability for my people and to create nonviolence. Like, that is my prayer. So care, like what you're doing right now, is the antidote to so many things, Charlyn. So I love that you're literally taking this on the stoop right now, like in the midst of mutual aid. And I also think that's the particular way like Black people and Black queer people and like Black femme non-binary people show up for our movements. Like, yeah, we're gonna do the panel, but we're gonna do it at the stoop because people need to get fed. So yeah, just really grateful for that.
It is a certain amount of like unreasonable. Sorry,
go for it. Yes, please.
I think I have a delay on my side. Well, I was just riding that wave that you kicked up. Is like the time for being reasonable is out the fucking window. It's not the time for that. It's time to be unreasonable with the way that we create space and say, I belong here, this practice belongs here. And it makes me think about like earlier in my career, my oldest is 16 now. And when I was pregnant with him and right after he was born, I was living in New York City and working in the Bronx, schools in the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan. And I basically was like, my child was just born. I'm super dope at what I do here. My child is going to come to work with me. He's nursing. He's like very quiet right now. He's a newborn. Create space for that. And Absolutely. They did. And every organization that I worked for after that did. And so now there's this, I see this culture of like, childcare is an essential part of organizing now. It wasn't necessarily always like that, So I think that the more that we push those boundaries and we do, as you say, like it's the mutual aid in real time, the more that we push that, the more that informs like what guides economics. And so where we are economically, if it's centric to us and our needs, as you say, the livability is met. I think my current work, the Maaluseum, this inquiry that I'm doing around cowries really speaks to that connection because, cowries, we understand about them historically that they were once a form of, there was a monetary system tied to them.
Right.
And so to know that it was once currency, and what we understand about currency is that it's energy, it's about waves of energy. And what we know about labor and the way that we see each other and those exchanges, like all of that is kind of caught up in my inquiry around the cowrie. And not to mention its the spiritual implications of utilizing cowries and the way that our ancestors, so many of our ancestors, used cowries as protection, to create amulets, to send messages, not just the divinations that people like think of when they think of maybe African traditional religion, but as far as Indonesia. One of the fellows in my fellowship is an Indonesian person, and I showed them my work and they were like, I haven't seen that shell in so long. Thank you for returning it to me. Like I didn't know other people used them. I thought it was just Indonesian. So many people globally resonate with this device that we use for ceremony. And I think for me, using it as a tracker for keeping an accounting of how many stories I hear or read through in the archives. When I think about creature, plants, all of human kin, these ancestors that I engage with, and has become this like really dynamic tool for keeping count and to see some of the sculptural work that I'm doing. But it also ties to what we're talking about, which is like bringing more ceremony to any space that we're in and any work that we're doing, and how appropriate it is. I think I heard you say about the sort of the advocacy and activism, organizing work. Liz, you mentioned about your altar and the work that you're doing with that, which I'm imagining is like tactile work. Is there anything else that's tactile that you're working on that feels really special to you right now? Or is there a medium that's showing up that's feeling really dynamic for you?
Ooh, that is a juicy question. Well, I think I have been foraging this fall, which I love, especially in the pandemic, just being able to really root into the ecosystems here, and notice the changes season by season has been just balm for my spirit. And I'm always writing. So definitely committed to that medium. And I have a ritual that was given to me by a beloved healer. Yeah, I don't know if there's anybody in the chat who's healing from codependency, but I recommend this to y'all. And they was like, yeah, come on, roll call. They was like, yeah, you need to, they were like, you are a ritual ass person. Like, you need to ritualize, like, you know, you're healing from codependency and like some of your grief around this. And they told me to get this, to get a broom, like a ceremonial broom, like a witch's broom, essentially. And when people bring things to my doorstep, to my threshold, emotionally, spiritually, physically, that are not mine to hold, I literally sweep that ish away. So I heard the honking in the back. They were like, I know that's right. So that has been a practice that has been really grounding for me in this season. Absolutely. And artistically, I love the fact that you brought up cowrie shells, because I've been teaching a youth residency with Led to Life and have been just obsessed with memory jars and memory jugs, which basically were created by enslaved people in the Americas, also the Caribbean, Brazil, and were basically decorated with different objects like cowrie shells, keys, nails, whatever folks could find, and placed on the unmarked graves of enslaved people. And this tradition comes from the Bakongo people of West Central Africa. And so I've also just, in teaching these youth about different burial practices, grief practices that have survived the terror of the transatlantic slave trade, I keep coming back to memory jars. And I just, yeah, I would love to share a little bit more about Led to Life and our practice of alchemy, because what you said, I feel like you're alchemizing the violent history that cowries have been placed in against their will. You know, you're helping liberate them from the boundaries of being just capital, just in the way that our bodies and our ancestors' bodies were capital. That's right. And one of the things that I think about a lot, and like in our practice with Led to Life, like we create altars at every one of our ceremonies, and we always make sure on our altars to bring in our more than human kin that was also in bondage, that was also forced to be in shapes that they didn't want to be in, that were also forcibly put in rows, that were denied access to water, all of these things. So I'm thinking about rice, I'm thinking about cotton, I'm thinking about sugar cane, like that. These plants are like deeply tied to our history of liberation. We can't forget that now. So I mean, I have chills just thinking about it. So I love thinking about cowrie shells also being an invitation to this alchemy work that we're doing around resisting being capital for this country. We're not doing it anymore. Yeah, so just as a brief intro, I know I really haven't explained what it is Led to Life does, but we are a translocal collective of Black diasporic healers, ecologists, artists, and we are devoted to answering Mark Anthony Johnson's prayer that Black wellness is the antidote to violence. Excuse me, that was a mix-up of Mark and Saida Hartman. Black wellness is the antithesis of state violence. So we bridge environmental justice and racial justice through ceremony and art practice. And we are committed to what we call applied alchemy, which is yielding alchemy to provoke radical imaginations for its justice. So what does that look like? We work alongside predominantly Black communities that are really on the front lines of environmental racism and also other forms of state violence. To quote Kat Brooks out of Oakland, you know, all violence is state violence. So we work alongside ceremonialists, mostly from Black diasporic traditions, so Lukumi, Sepihdeah folks, to hold public rituals and public ceremonies to honor and elevate the Black dead. And all folks who are really struggling with environmental racism, gun violence, and all the different myriad of ways that state violence impacts our lives. And it's just really important to us that we have these ceremonial public interventions because our grief rituals have been surveilled and criminalized since we were brought to this country forcibly. And it's an invitation to witness our grief with us and alongside us, and to kind of redistribute that, because it's not our trauma to hold. You know, in slavery, the terror of police brutality, this is not Black history. This is white supremacist history. So we really want to redistribute that grief and invite folks with us, because our grief and our trauma is literally being whitewashed from the landscape. And that's not just for Black people or marginalized people, that's also for the land, that's also for our more than human kin. Their erasure is being completely erased from, completely hidden and forcibly removed from our collective consciousness. So yeah, we just want to restore, just restore our ability to grieve together. That's really the fundamental prayer of our practice. There's an Alice Walker quote that really orients me. And she says, those who love us never leave us alone with our grief. So that's what we're here to do.
That's absolutely right. Thank you for bringing her into this space as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Should we launch into some of these questions in the chat?
Do you see them in Q&A as well? I see. What are some?
Oh yeah, please, let's do.
Yeah. What are some practices for connecting the past, the present, and the future is the first question I'll pose.
Well, just to answer briefly, I think ceremony is that practice. I think ceremony is one of the ways that really can bridge through time. It connects us 7 generations forward and back. Whenever you can bring in ritual, whenever you can bring in ceremony of any lineage, it just orients our attention in a different way. It invites folks to arrive in a completely different way. So that's my recommendation.
We're speaking so much of like,
I'm trying to remember. Go ahead, Sepihdeah.
No, you go, Charlyn. We don't have that much time.
Yeah, I think I was just trying to recall what I was writing. It was in the last 2 days, and I was writing, and it's this piece that I just finished, and I wrote. It's called "Research is a Recipe," and it's just going through like the research that I was doing when basically the pandemic started, and how the pandemic shifted my research and my ability to be in the archive in person, and how I thought that it had shifted and made it different, but what I recognized was that it expanded. And so I think that expansiveness is a meditation too, to consider the past and the future in the same moment as you being present. And I wrote this recipe at the end of it. I did narrative and then included these like anecdotal recipes. And the last recipe that I wrote was how to be like an amazing ancestor, how to become an amazing ancestor. And
I love it.
What I prescribed was something along the lines of, speak to your progeny also. Speak and listen and do for your ancestors. Speak to your progeny. I think that ancestor veneration, worship, and altars so often is focused on those that came before us.
Yeah.
But we really are building, we're building upon land that they walked and land that is promised to those that will come after us.
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I really agree, and I'll try and like share a link or something through maybe to attendees after this to this this article, so you all can get those recipes.
Yes, please do.
Thank you for that question.
I love that. I'm excited to check that resource out. Yes, doing something like that, crafting a mantra with your group, your collective, your neighborhood, whatever it is, setting up an altar, you know,
That's
when you're
right.
in space, all that are great tools to do that. Another question is, do you have resources that build courage for artists who have been wounded by accusations of cultural appropriation, even though they are direct descendants of the local original people?
I can say that I think that the piece that I'm just referenced, I really want to share that because it's got so many footnotes and links to resources. And I think it might be an interesting format for an artist to look at. I created this format for my writing very recently because I was receiving like editorial notes that were very anti-Black. They were upholding like the linear thinking of the institution. And I was really hurt by the feedback that I got on my writing and discouraged. And so something moved me. It actually was back in July. I've been writing the piece for some time because it wasn't just about writing the piece. I was designing a template that would allow me as a descendant of original people, as a Black meaning Indigenous person, as a Indigenous person, Indigenous meaning sovereign person meaning artist, to like figure out how to hold my own in these spaces and build courage, as you say. And so the brave space that I needed to create was right there in the document, in the paper. And so this piece, the way that I used like annotations that are usually used for scholarly writing, the way that I kind of turned a lot of language on its head and brought in different flows of that, it would be helpful. I think I can offer that resource.
Can I also, there's two questions I really want to put out there before we just close in peace, but what is, can you share about your practices of safety and grief work? And I feel like this is so just like seasonally relevant as we turn into the fall and as we turn into ourselves. And then the other question, if we don't have time, we can reflect on collectively, and I'll send out an email form to attendees. But it's, are there any public art examples that are in line with these discussions? And I would say the rituals that led to life are definitely public art examples that you can kind of dig into and explore to the person who asked that question, but we'll also send out and speak to some of those other examples. I'm going to turn on the light in my space.
Safety and grief practices. That is such an amazing question. Oof.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think one thing that really supports me is that I have a container for it. Like literally Sunday is my day. And I'm like, look, I don't know if it looks like dance. I don't know if it looks like crying. I don't know if it looks like screaming. I don't know if it looks like taking a bath, but I give myself dedicated space and time to feel and to allow grief to move through me. So as somebody who likes to hyper compartmentalize my emotions, I think that has really supported me in helping me feel safe. Because I just allow whatever needs to be felt to come through, knowing that oftentimes grief is coming through us that isn't actually ours, especially those of us who come from lineages of deep violence, right? So there's intergenerational trauma, there's trauma from the land. Those of us tuning in from Turtle Island are all on stolen land. That's grief, that's trauma that might be coming through you. So permission, like consentful permission, I think is really important. The other thing I'll uplift is spiritual hygiene. You know, when you call on ancestors, for example, or when you're doing altar work, you know, it's important to call upon the benevolent ancestors. I am of mixed race heritage. My mother is white, and I come from a lineage of settlers who were loggers and who have committed massive harm on this continent to Black and Indigenous and Brown people. So I know that a lot of ancestors on that side of my family probably do not really rock with me. So I call upon the benevolent ones, known and unknown, to guide me. And so that's one way that I can be practicing that spiritual hygiene. And also, I think some of the decolonizing work that all of us need to commit to is to tap into the spiritual lineages of our actual cultures. So I'm not just thinking about Afro-diasporic you know, practices like pouring of libations and altar veneration, ancestor veneration. I'm also thinking about, like, I use rue a lot in my practice, and I, from my Nordic ancestors, I'm in conversation with Celtic traditions. So, you know, don't be burning appropriated, endangered sage if that's not your people and that's not your practice. So I think that's another really important way to practice discernment when it comes to envisioning your own grief rituals. And the more you strengthen your intuition, you know, that is ancestral connection. That is one way to feel really safe. If you can trust yourself, then you can trust whatever you're feeling to come through you. So.
The only thing that I would add to that, because I think, Liz, that was really, really good, thank you, is therapy.
Come on now.
I think folks, I think honestly, in terms of safety and particularly in community, we do a lot of leaning on each other, and that is good, but we need to, again, that word consent is so important. A lot of folks are calling up people that will listen and take in and absorb when they really need to be seeking out a therapist. And one of the things that I've really been in conversation with folks around therapy about is sometimes just doing, it's fine to say, I don't like every therapist and have, like, you know, be choosy about that. Sometimes you just really need to do the practice of going to talk to somebody else anyway. Like, you know, you might be like, fuck you at the end. I don't care what you're saying, like what you're saying back to me, but you get to say to them what you need to say and hear it out loud for yourself. That's a part of that, like, trusting yourself practice. That's something that you have to build up too. Just like we build trust with others, I want to acknowledge that, like, building trust in ourselves is something that is also gradual, you know, and that actually is the other thing that I would say is, like, you know, respect time. Don't try to rush things. Rushing is often the way that we make ourselves unsafe as well. You know, we don't have to push ourselves. We don't have to feign productivity or accomplishment when it comes to dealing with our grief. And so take time. One of the other recipes in my thing is about something that my mom would say to me. She said, you know, if you really wanted to do it, you would make time, you know. And so the idea of, like, going and cooking it up and making time is very real.
That is a Black proverb, undoubtedly. I can literally hear my dad's voice. Yes. Beautiful. Well,
do we want to try and grab one more question? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The question was about other examples of some of what we're talking about, right? So yeah, I mean, for those who aren't familiar with my work with Led to Life, would definitely please check it out. We A big part of our practice in these public ceremonies is we work with a team of welders to melt guns into the otherwise. So we've melted guns into shovels, into spades, into stars, and then we use those objects in rituals. So tree plantings, we've done we've done tree plantings and ecological restoration days at Indigenous-led land trusts, at grain cemeteries, at Buddhist temples. Our most recent ceremony happened in August in Occupy Boricua, Puerto Rico. We basically worked with a Black-led artist collective to hold ceremony at the site of an abandoned mine that they're turning into a school. And they reached out to us and we're just like, look, we don't even know how to honor the ecological violence that has been created here. And like, that's one of the life cycles of environmental racism, right? Is like, why did these Black people get this land? We know why. So we actually held ceremony down there with our Alchemize shovels. Other comrades I want to uplift, Solitary Gardens out of New Orleans. And I'm going to put their information in the chat. This is such a beautiful practice. It was born from a relationship that the founder Jackie had with an incarcerated person named Herman Wallace. They had been in community and friends for years, and basically he's in solitary confinement. And in his 29th year, she asked him, what kind of house does a man who has lived in a 6 foot by 9 foot box for almost 30 years dream of? And he dreamt of a garden. And so Jackie actually creates garden installations that are in the exact shape and dimensions of a solitary confinement cell, and works with incarcerated people to actually curate the garden. So to like pick out which plants, to pick out the pollinators, to really visualize, I want it to smell like this, I want it to feel like this. And so I think that's another really beautiful example of ways that folks are really putting abolitionist practice into public art at the intersections of racial justice and environmental justice. So really want to uplift Jackie's work for sure.
And Angel just mentioned, and I was gonna shout out the Village of Arts and Humanities here in Philadelphia, who does work. I'm trying to find the name that they do their work under now. Quantum Futurist.
Oh yes, Black feminist quantum period.
I'm trying to find their work. Black Quantum Futurism, that's right. Also does work and has done public art with the Village of Arts and Humanities as well. They currently have oh yes, thank you for dropping the link. Perfect. So those are a couple of groups, that we're familiar with that are doing work here in Philadelphia. But I think if Sepihdeah, you're down to send out an email afterward, I'm sure we can build a bigger list.
Thank you so much for giving us a snapshot into this magic in your practices. I didn't know that we'd be talking so much about mushrooms today, and that really uplifted me. I'm new to Philly, and one of the first things I did, I was feeling so like disoriented when we moved here from California, that I enrolled in this beautiful like community liberatory like herbalism course that was very seasonal, that was very much rooted in grounding myself into this new space. And it has been nothing short of ceremonial, and I feel so grateful for that. And I feel so grateful for how much you evoked the spirit of that in this space. I was like, Liz, I didn't know we were going to be talking about chicken in the woods tonight.
We are here.
That's right.
That's that decomposition work for real. We be giving the pollinators all the love.
Totally.
Like the mushrooms be working. The mycelium.
That's beautiful.
I'm trying to talk about Sepihdeah's shirt with the cacti, because that.
My goodness. I just shop at the same store as my toddler, right? We got that Cali connection, Charlyn.
We need that. Yes.
We do.
My daughter said she dresses just like me. Don't worry. Everyone looks at her and it's like, oh, she's really your mini me. And we dress exactly alike. She just started getting into the crop crop tops. Don't worry.
Oh, come on now.
I love this. I love this. I just want to thank you all for being here tonight. And yeah, we'll curate a nice
thank you
little
so
email
much.
for folks to follow along with this work and your work and others. And to those in the audience, thank you so much for being here with us tonight and for evoking all the names and the spirits of which you wanted to be part of this conversation with. We appreciate you, and folks in the chatter are saying lovely things as well. Thank you all. Mushroom emojis. Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Liz, thank you again. And Sepihdeah, thank you for holding us. It was really refreshing and encouraging to be held this way by an event organizer, to be held by the person on the side of the institution. And so I want to thank you, and I want to uplift energy that it takes to do that in spite of and because of work that you're doing. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, definitely echoing that gratitude. The care and the intention was a part of this process from the beginning. So a joy, truly. And Charlyn, this is just the beginning of our connections, weaving, collaboration, all that. So
yes,
Beautiful.
absolutely. I'm a shovel, a spade, a small spade.
Yes, I
to
got
bring to life and put it in the archive. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yes.
The archive, the altar, period.
My son said,
period.
you should make beds. And I was like, you are 4 and you were talking about housing justice. He was literally like, they should make beds.
Come on.
I was like, I'll pass that on.
No, I literally love it. Alchemize beds, 100%.
Thank you all. Good night. Good night. We will we'll have a recording of this conversation up on the Mural Arts Institute recordings and events page as well. Well, thank you all, and have a good night, a safe weekend.
Bless.
Thanks so much. Gratitude.